It feels like the entire world is obsessed with Kpop Demon Hunters right now, so here's a long overdue video with several DIYs inspired by the film. The first one are these hanging paper dolls, which are really popular on TikTok. I've seen so many versions, but none of the tutorials seem to teach you how to draw them. This is arguably the hardest bit, so let's jump right in. I'm going to start with the head on the very left, and then I'm using a ruler to draw 3 guidelines. It's a bit hard to see, but this helps you keep an eye on the proportions. I'm basically drawing a deconstructed chibi body with the face, arms, body and hair next to each other. The guidelines are important for maintaining the 1:1 or 1:2 head-to-body ratio. Now I'm going to outline this. My favorite combo is a 0.1mm fine liner for the inner lines and a 0.3mm for the outer ones. It's particularly important to make the outermost lines a bit thicker because you can cut it out more easily without leaving any wide gaps. Once the first doll is done, you can easily trace the shapes through a window to make more. This is so much easier than having to draw every doll from scratch. I'm tracing 2 more templates for Zoey and Mira. Another important detail with paper dolls is to create a triangular hanging tag at the top. This makes the final piece more realistic and also acts like a handle so you don't have to hold onto the hair. In case you're interested in learning more about manga art, I have a whole book on how to draw chibis. It teaches you all the basics and will make DIYs like this so much easier. I'm going to use a set of markers that I got from a discount store. For paper crafts, I feel that having a wider range of colors is more important than the quality of the markers. Since the Huntrix girls have such different outfits and hair colors, I want to match each shade as closely as possible. I'm also using the same chibi eye from the credits scene where each pupil has a sparkle inside. I've tried looking everywhere for the name of the artist that drew the K-pop chibis, but unfortunately I couldn't find it, but I absolutely love this style. So once everything has been colored in, I'm cutting each piece out very carefully. Now it's time to assemble the dolls. First, stack them together to check that everything looks good. Another tip when drawing a group of chibis is to make sure each one has a very different facial expression. This brings more life into your characters. Now it's time to make some holes. The easiest method is to make an X shape using a sharp craft knife. Then poke a pencil tip to widen the hole and trim away the edges. I've seen some dolls with 2 separate arms, but I would recommend making both arms at once because it saves you a lot of work and the final result is virtually the same. To make the sticks, take a very thin sheet of paper like a post-it note and cut out a rectangle. Roll it up tightly and secure with tape. Place the pieces together and mark out the best place for the stick. For the next part, I would definitely recommend using hot glue. This is fast and effective at sticking paper, so you can have your doll ready within minutes instead of waiting hours for liquid glue to dry. Simply slot each piece onto the stick and make sure they can swing around. The amount of movement makes a big difference in how good these finished paper dolls look. So you want to hang as many pieces as possible to maximize movement. This also includes the triangle tag at the back. You can trim the sticks a bit, but try to keep them at least 2 centimeters long to provide more space between the paper pieces. Once everything is in place, just seal off the top with a square piece of card. I changed the construction slightly to fit each girl's hairstyle. Mira is the only one where the sticks are actually attached to her hair. I also decided to glue the tag instead of hanging it because I feel there are already enough layers in this design. For Rumi, I had both the braid and the tag swinging freely, which works very well. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and it's so satisfying for a paper craft. For Zoey, I cut a hole in the hanging tag so it looks more like the straps of her top. I feel Mira turned out best in terms of movement because of all that extra depth with her hair. I loved making these dolls, and I feel they're definitely worth the viral hype. Now moving on to our next DIY, which is Abby's Abs Squishy. I want to remind you that this is an official piece of Netflix merch, so they clearly also see the potential in a Demon 6-pack. As always, I'm going to start with a polymer clay model. I'm using 2 blocks of Fimo clay and making a round chibi-style head. This is the first Happy Squishy where I plan to make the hair separately, so it makes the sculpting stage easier. After making the face, I'm attaching on the torso, followed by the arms. This pose isn't just for flexing, but it's also designed to support the head. This makes the entire piece easier to mold and demold later on. Now I'm cutting out smaller pieces of clay for the muscles and arranging these into place. Abs basically look like progressively smaller Tic Tacs. Now I'm baking this for 30 minutes. Next, I'm mixing up a big batch of silicone putty and pressing the hardened polymer clay inside. This is a fairly complex design, so I was slightly worried about the molding stage. I ended up having to break apart the polymer clay, but the mold turned out surprisingly well. I'm mixing up a batch of Tabas silicone and adding this flesh-colored pigment. I'm pouring everything into the mold and letting it cure for 3 hours. To my relief, this demolded without any problems. Now it's time to add the hair. First, I'm felting a few leaf shapes and then attaching them together. Then I'm covering it up with Abby's yellow beanie. To my surprise, I don't need any glue for this. I'm basically felting the hair and hat into the squishy and they stay in place just fine. To make the eyes, I'm using the same method from my Teeny Ping video, which is to paint them on. Since the squishable part is supposed to be the abs and not the face, I'm not worrying too much about the paint coming off. Abby has pink pupils and a very distinct hook-shaped eyebrow. I have to add that I fully intended to make his Hawaiian shirt as well, but the final squishy didn't have any gaps between the arms and neck. This makes it nearly impossible to dress up the doll with a real shirt, or attach fabric in the small area without it falling off. This version looks a tiny bit naked, but sometimes you just have to commit to an idea even if it doesn't end up as planned. So I'm still very happy with how this turned out. Last but not least, we have Derpy the tiger made from air dry clay. The goal I had with this one is to create a tutorial that's genuinely easy enough for most beginner crafters to do. The problem is that Derpy is a very complex character. The design is complicated, the coloring is complicated, and it's just really tricky to turn him into a three-dimensional object. The idea I had was to drastically simplify the sculpting stage by putting Derpy in a flower pot. This is his favorite thing to play with in the film, so it feels quite fitting. To keep it easy, I'm only going to use these 4 colors of clay, which are often found in cheap multi-packs like this. It's essentially only 3 colors because I'm going to mix both blues together to make a bigger batch. You can wrap unused clay inside a damp tissue or wet wipe to prevent it from drying up. I found this tiny flower pot in the garden center and I'm filling it with white. This is just to bulk out the space because I know I'm going to have a lot of white clay left over. Then I'm adding some blue on top. Now I'm creating a flattish oval shape for the head and using scissors to make 3 horizontal cuts. This is followed by 2 diagonal cuts to create the mouth. I'm removing as much clay as I can with the scissors and smoothing everything out with water. Next, I'm adding 2 small pieces for the ears and using a toothpick to make a hollow triangle. This gets filled with yellow clay. To make the eyes, I'm carefully pressing a small piece of yellow into a leaf shape and attaching it onto the face with water. I'm adding the nose with light blue and I'm going to paint over this later on in the correct color. Now it's time for the teeth. Derpy has a row of very tiny short teeth in the middle, followed by 2 pointier canines. These are flanked by 2 large fangs pointing in the opposite direction. The upper teeth are even tinier, so add as many as you can without getting them stuck together. I'm joining the head to the body with some wet clay and we're almost done. I'm going to make 3 cuts into a small ball of clay and smoothing these out to make the paw. This gets hooked over the edge of the flower pot, so it creates the illusion that Derpy's body is there without having to sculpt it. Same for the tail. This is super easy to make and it just implies he's sitting inside the pot. Once this is dried, it's time to add color. I'm using acrylic paint that's quite watered down to make it slightly translucent. I'm starting with an orange for the eyes and then gradually building up the shading until the corners are fully red. Then I'm painting the nose and ears the correct crimson color. The eyes have a black leaf-shaped pupil and a single shine spot. I'm also using paint for all of the pale blue fur markings. This is something which could theoretically be made with clay, but it feels significantly more difficult. With paint, you just have to be careful not to cover too much at once, because it's hard to correct mistakes on colored clay. I'm finishing up with the dark blue markings and using a slightly broken line to make it look furry. And now we've got Derpy the tiger inside a flower pot. I had loads of fun making these, and I hope you get to try some out. There are endless things that you can create from this film. My daughter has been making so many Demon Hunter crafts, including these paper ramen cups and a Saja Boy soda can. I'm Joanna, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!